Welcome to the SaaS Revolution Show. I'm your host, Alex Theuma. Delighted to be joined today by, I would say, a long-time friend in the SaaS industry. He's the CEO of G2, founder of G2, multiple SaaS businesses in the past. Welcome to the show, Godard Abel.
Yeah, great to be here with you, Alex.
Good to have you on the podcast again. I was just saying, I think it's the first time I'm classically interviewing you. We've had you before with Jacko, and we've published a couple of your talks from SaaStock. And then I thought, well, actually, we've not had this kind of one-to-one conversation on the podcast, so I'm really kind of looking forward to it. And Godard, I guess I always kind of start, by asking who the guest is, and I'm not going to break the tradition. So please tell the audience listening today, who is Godard Abel?
Yeah, so I'm a SaaS entrepreneur. Been building SaaS companies for 25 years and exited two. The first one, Big Machines, Oracle. Became Oracle CPQ Cloud. Then we built SteelBrick, which became the Salesforce CPQ and the Salesforce Revenue Cloud. And now I'm building G2. And G2, we're really aiming to build the trusted place you go for software. When we started, we called it Yelp for business software. And now it's really become the trusted source of data and insight on SaaS, on software. And so really excited to be here with you, Alex, and love the community you're building around the world, all around SaaS.
No, appreciate it. And where are you in Boulder today? Because I know that I think during COVID, you moved to Boulder. You're still there?
Yes, that's where my home office is. And obviously fun to get back on the road. It was great to be with you and the SaaStock community in Austin. I'm going to go see you in Dublin. But when I'm in my office now, a lot of times in Boulder here, great place to be.
And outside of building G2 with Boulder, and I think what's available to you, any hobbies like hiking, snowboarding, mountain biking, anything like that?
Yeah, no, I love being out in the mountains. Actually, this weekend I'm doing what's called a triple bypass.
Okay.
It's a
ominous name.
It's going over 3 mountain passes.
Okay.
And but I do find it very therapeutic to get outdoors, do workouts. I think great, but one of the best ways to take your mind off work and feel better.
100%, definitely. And I know you gave a brief explanation there of what G2 is, and I'm 90% confident that everybody listening, knows who G2 is. But tell us about kind of like G2 today, right? I think, and some of the things in terms of the business, as I understand, you passed 100 million ARR, probably I think some time ago. It was probably some point sort of last year. Tell us about who you are today, where you are, what's the size of the business, where are you going? Where do you want to take this?
Yeah, and G2, the overall vision is to be the trusted place you go for software. And our number one mission is to really help software buyers discover and quickly vet and buy the best SaaS apps out there. And when we started the company just over 10 years ago, there really were no trusted software reviews, and it was really hard for software buyers to discover the right apps. And our bet, I think a lot like yours with SaaStock, was that software is going to eat the world. And Mark Andreessen said that about a decade ago, right when we were starting G2, and I think he was right. And sometimes I like to say G2 is the buffet, the buffet of SaaS and of software. And what's cool today on G2, there's over 100,000 different SaaS apps and cloud services listed. And there's over 2,000 categories of SaaS. And what's amazing, I remember when we started, we just did CRM. Because the first 2 companies I built were CPQ companies, which were always tied into CRM and CRM partners. And so we use CRM to prove the G2 model, but now it's just amazing. There's over 2,000 categories. And obviously some of them over the years that have emerged, like conversational intelligence or robotic process automation. We're also proud. I think G2 helps launch those new categories. And then obviously leaders, like Gong, Chorus, or robotic process automation, UiPath, Automation Anywhere, they emerge in the market, and G2 really helps accelerate those innovative SaaS apps to get out there. And it all starts with helping the software buyer discover them. And then we do believe, and I think also Gartner says this, 80 to 90% of the buying decision now of a SaaS buyer is made online. They're doing their own research, and they all know what happens when you submit that lead form. And obviously as a software vendor, we love that, but they're not ready yet for SDR, BDR sales conversations. So they shop quietly, they do research. And we're really proud now. There's 8 to 9 million software buyers every month researching SaaS apps on G2. And so our vision is coming to life, but I'd also say we still have a long way to go. It's a very dynamic industry we're in. And I think one of the things we're most excited about now is AI. And we've added all these new AI categories obviously LLMs, but also categories like vector databases. And like myself, I didn't even know what a vector database was a few months ago, but now it's become this key enabling software for all LLMs, for all AI. And G2 now, we're quickly spinning up categories, adding those technologies so we can capture reviews and help buyers sort it out. And we're applying our AI ourselves. And we've launched an AI Monty, which is really a conversational AI driven interface for the software buyer. And, so we do feel like we're just getting started and excited for this new age of AI.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, you mentioned Mark Andreessen, who had the famous blog and quote, "The software is going to eat the world." I think his new one was AI is going to save the world.
Mm.
Do you share that sentiment?
I am an optimist, and I did read, Mark's blog, AI is going to save the world. And I think there are a lot of valid ethical concerns, but I'm also, as a software entrepreneur, I tend to be an optimist. And I do think all technology, whether software or otherwise, it can be used for good or for evil. And I think Mark points out all the applications for good, certainly in areas like education, medicine. And I think maybe also in our world of SaaS, right? I think it can just make all our apps better. And, because I think most software interfaces now that you see AI, and I think about ChatGPT is so popular because it's just like, you're just talking to the computer. It's a human conversation. And most software is still pretty rigid, and even like CRM systems like Salesforce. And as I mentioned, I worked at Salesforce a bit. They bought Steelbrick, or the way we built Steelbrick. It's all like this forms and workflow based software, which I think most SaaS apps are today. And that's very useful, because you get a global database, you get better business processes. But for the user, it's always a bad experience. Like what sales rep loves to update their opportunity and fill in their 20 required MedPIC fields? I've never met a sales rep that loves that. And I think now the future is going to be, they can just have a conversation with the AI, whether it's typing. And I also think now voice to text with AI is getting so good, AI transcription, like, obviously tools like Gong and Chorus, and we use it to record all our sales calls. I think probably most people do today. But also I think it can, soon you'll be able to talk to the software and talk to our G2 Monty. And so I think it's really going to change, almost all software apps, and really for the better of the user, because I think it'll just be a much more natural human conversational experience now where you talk to the software and the software goes and finds the information, and the software just asks you, hey, do you need to update this opportunity, Alex? I see you haven't updated in 2 months. And by the way, I noticed there were 6 emails. Looks like it's heating up. Would you like me to just move it up to 80%? And I think it's going to be that kind of natural experience that, we can all deliver. So I think it's it's very exciting for the future of SaaS.
And in a moment, we're going to talk about and ask about how you've adopted AI and start to sort of reimagine G2 and some of that. You've shared a few sort of like tidbits there. But instead of the present and the future, I just want to talk a little bit about the past in terms of you getting to that 100 million mark. And maybe if you can share, and I'm sure there are so many, but a few kind of like key lessons. How do you build G2 to get to 100 million? What are some of the key steps that you did to get to that figure?
And I think entrepreneurship is always very incremental. And I know, Alex, you're also an entrepreneur. What I always tell people, I think it does get easier, where I think the hardest dollar of revenue is the first dollar. And I remember at G2, I think it took us, well over a year. And actually my co-founder, Tim Handorf, he said he wouldn't get a haircut until we generated revenue, and he started looking like Jesus. And, it wasn't a good look for him. He's an Iowa farm kid. And, and I think the first dollar of revenue we generated, honestly, when we started G2, like we had this vision, like we're going to make software buying better and we're going to create this Yelp-like site. But honestly, we didn't know how we were going to make money. And we were lucky because, we already had one exit. We'd sold Big Machines first, 51% to private equity, then to Oracle. So we were able to use some of that money to self-fund. Because honestly, also at the beginning, most VCs I went to, they thought G2 was a bad idea. Because they were like, like this isn't just another SaaS company. We don't get the business model. How are you going to make money? And I honestly didn't have a very good answer. And secondly, they were also skeptical that, this whole consumer review model would work in B2B. And so we actually self-funded. We got a little bit of friends and family, but I think the first 2 million was almost all our own money. And because we kind of had to figure out, one, would the model work? And so even before generating revenue, right, we built CRM, we had to get enough reviews, we had enough software buyers shopping for CRM software so we could start to monetize. And the first sale was actually a CRM, today what we call a grid report. And because at the beginning we're like, well, maybe we can get buyers to kind of download premium content to help them buy the best CRM software. But I think we quickly realized that's kind of a bad business model, because who wants to pay for a downloaded report? And even more broadly, in hindsight, it's kind of obvious, who wants to pay for information on the internet? Really no one, and I think even like going way back, and I still grew up like going to school in the 1980s, and we had like Encyclopedia Britannica, and that was the best knowledge resource before the internet, right? And they could sell those for thousands of dollars, like a beautiful bound book. And then obviously Wikipedia came along, right? And information's free. And I think largely is on the internet. So we also realize, hey, that's what the modern software buyer wants. They certainly don't want paywalls. They don't want stuff gated. They want information freely available so they can do their research, make their buying decisions. So we kind of realized, we pivoted and said, hey, the best way to monetize is via the software vendor, the software marketer. So once what we discovered in categories like CRM software, once we had a lot of CRM software buyers coming, then there were vendors. And I remember our first vendor customer was a UK-based CRM software vendor, and actually a small one that wasn't yet in the US market. Because frankly, like the Salesforce of the world, they already had validation. And the company was called Workbooks. Mm-hmm. And they were like, wow, this is amazing. And they seized on G2 early. They got lots of customer reviews. We validated they were a high performer. And they were like, could we license your content? Could we use this in our own campaigns? Because we don't want to send people to g2.com because they'll see all our competitors. We're like, wow, that's a good idea. So then we kind of worked with marketers and developed that business model. But I think it took us probably then 2 or 3 years just to get to $1 million, ARR. And I think this is what most SaaS entrepreneurs find out. So if I'm a first company, that first $1 million is by far the hardest, right? And then the marketplace started getting momentum. And I think took us about 5 years to get to 10 million. And that was also when the VCs all of a sudden got excited. We were probably at 5 or 6 million before we got our real first institutional VC, which was Excel. And then Excel actually came to us inbound because they started saying, hey, we're seeing G2 in all our SaaS entrepreneur pitches. And we think what you guys are doing is really cool. We think this could be big. And we're like, wow, amazing. And so we did partner with them. They led our first institutional round. And then at that point, the flywheel started spinning. And honestly, then I think when they invested, we were maybe at 5 or 6. And then I think we just kind of started scaling organically, where we had the basic flywheel, which was get reviews in a category, get the buyer traffic. So we've always invested a ton in SEO and content, both technical SEO and content, the core content being reviews. But also we discovered, we hired a research team that writes blogs, writes learn content around a category like CRM. A lot of the HubSpot inbound playbook, if you will, but for a marketplace. And, and then we realized if we develop these marketing solutions that allow software vendor marketers to better reach our audience, we developed a buyer intent product so they could target all the buyers. We allowed them to use the content, just like I described Workbooks, where if they want to use our grids, our reviews, and our own marketing campaigns. And we kept working with the marketers. And then the flywheel started going. And we grew it now to over 2,000 categories. Now we have over 3,000 software vendor customers. And, but like I said, I think 0 to 1 was by far the hardest. 1 to 10, I think we sort of figured out the flywheel. And then honestly, for a while, until 2021, it felt kind of easy. Then we quickly got to 50. And obviously right now it's getting harder again, because we're just over that, just right around just over that 100. And right now it is harder. Growth rate has slowed down a lot, because we mainly serve SaaS and our, as we know, for so many founders, entrepreneurs, companies, it's hard to raise funding. Yep. And frankly, even the big vendors like Salesforce, they're all shifting to profitability now, right? And providing a solution to software marketers, it's harder right now, And I think that's the thing with entrepreneurship, just when you think you figured it out, it gets harder again. But I'm still optimistic, now the next thing for us, well, eventually I want to get to $1 billion in ARR. Yeah. And I still think it'll be easier. It'll be easier to get from 10 to a billion, 100 to $1 billion than it was to get from, frankly, 0 to 1, or even 0 to $1,000 is the hardest, right? And then I think each order of magnitude gets a bit easier, if you stay with it. And so that's kind of a very long answer, but it's I'd say years of grinding, and then eventually we figured out the flywheel and it started spinning. Yeah. Well, congrats. And obviously no easy feat. For any entrepreneur, first of all, to get your first customers, to get to the first million, but to get to 100 million,
I don't know what the percentage is, but you know, it's probably 0.04% of entrepreneurs or businesses going to make it. So congrats to that. And I'm sure you'll get to the billion mark. And actually, obviously now what you're doing, you know, with AI and thinking about the present and the future will I'm sure in some way play a big part in that. So let's jump into that then. And so I think it probably, I don't know if it was like October last year, you know, OpenAI, came out. I think like this with ChatGPT version 3 or 4, it started to kind of blow up. Everybody started to use it, realizing, you know, the power of this tool. Was that very similar with you? Or like, you know, how did you sort of realize or somebody in the business realize that, you know, G2 needed to incorporate AI? You know, was it a similar timeline?
Yeah, I think once I saw it, I think probably like the rest of the world. And I remember there were all those graphs, right? It went from 0 to like 100 million users, I don't know, in like days.
Yeah.
And then I tried it probably like everyone else. And I think then my co-founders, you know, Tim, Mike, and myself, like, we're just like, wow, this is so natural for G2, you know, because we're kind of an information data website. And the problem, frankly, with websites like ours, it's kind of a traditional taxonomy, if you will. You know, so you sort of have to know what you're shopping for. Like you have to know, hey, I'm looking for CRM software, marketing automation software. And frankly, it gets much more complicated right now. Like there used to be ABM, but now there's like account-based orchestration. And just within ABM, there's like 20 categories. And the reality is most business people, software buyers, they don't know like our industry taxonomy, right? And so we just, once we saw the ChatGPT interface, we're like, wow, this is perfect for guiding a software buyer with a conversation. And frankly, I think what's exciting about adding an AI interface to G2 that we call Monty is that you can just start with a business problem. You know, like Alex, you could just be like, hey, I have a sales forecasting problem. Then Monty will ask you, hey, what industry are you in? And you can say, hey, I'm a tech entrepreneur. And then we ask you, how many sales reps do you have? And, you know, and then based on your answers, we can dial it in. What we tap into both, and we're building on top of OpenAI. And the beauty of that, you know, you get their LLM, you get their interface that's trained on the whole internet, maybe 2 years old. And then what we're doing, we're injecting the G2 data. We're also building an OpenAI plugin. But then, you know, you get the best of both, where you get the OpenAI LLM trained on all the knowledge of mankind, at least, you know, up till 2 years ago. That's now on the internet. And then we inject the G2 review data, the G2 insights on top of it. And we're training Monty specifically for software buying use cases. And you can, I would encourage you all to try it. It's still an alpha, but, and you can give Monty feedback. That's the beauty of it. You know, you just talk to Monty, and, but Monty now guides you. It might say, hey, by the way, Alex, did you know there's a sales forecasting category? And did you know there's vendors, let's say like Clary, and here's the reviews, and, you know, and here's also a bunch of alternatives. And you can just talk to Monty and dial in, you know, the right software for you. And it already works amazingly well. And we were amazed when we first launched it. I think it was like in March, like even V1, like how well it already worked. And now we're really tuning it. And I think we're especially excited. And we're aiming to soon launch a G2 Monty plugin on the OpenAI plugin store. And, you know, we keep training it every day. And so it's just amazing how quickly. And then frankly, for years, we tried to build our own like software selectors. And frankly, they were always crappy. You know, we're like, these recommendations are probably only 60 to 70% good. And all of a sudden with LLMs now, you know, we think we can make it over 90% good and accurate.
Very cool. And I guess one trivial question and one important question, and maybe the trivial one is not trivial. So I'm just curious to know, why did you call it Monty? And then the other question is, and maybe it's obvious, like, why did you partner with OpenAI? Because there are now obviously quite a few competitors like coming out. So, and again, this is not a plug for OpenAI, but just trying to understand your rationale and thinking as to why them.
Yeah. And I think first, why Monty? And Monty is our G2 mascot, and actually based on a mongoose. And our co-founder, Mark, had created Monty a few years ago. And we also have a big Monty like that walks around shows like SaaStock. So it's a fun, friendly character. And so we just kind of thought it was natural. Now, you know, we're putting intelligence into Monty, and he's just a fun character that...
He was always intelligent, maybe.
Well, yeah, now he's got,
well,
hopefully soon AGI, right? And it was actually funny at our last all hands meeting. Tim, my co-founder, interviewed me and like asked me to make software recommendations, and then had Monty do it. And honestly, Monty crushed me. And I like to think, I've been in SaaS 25 years and, I've talked to hundreds, but honestly, I just don't remember that well. I think you use like an ESG stuff, for example. And honestly, I just like my brain got foggy and I'm like, I couldn't remember the leading product, and Monty just crushed it. So yeah, I think Monty's already getting smarter, at least on software buying and software data than any human. So that's exciting and fun. And then why OpenAI? I think, well, frankly, we just wanted to go fast. And I think there's even more options today than there were 3 or 4 months ago. And honestly, I don't know, is that going to be the right choice in 2 or 3 years? Honestly, I don't know. But we just said, hey, and they also, honestly, they have good terms and they do have, I think, good APIs. And even the legal terms, I think, were important to us. But our general counsel, Eunice, has also been working with their general counsel. But we do believe we can trust that the data we inject will remain ours. Whereas, frankly, like we looked at some of the Google terms, at least to us, they weren't as clear yet. So I think that's also something everyone needs to assess is, can you keep your own IP? Can you keep your data? And we do believe the OpenAI terms, make that clear. And we trust that will be the case, because that is a risk, right? Even for G2, for anyone running an information website, like, because if people only go to ChatGPT or Bard, and they don't come to a website like ours anymore, like there's a risk there. And that's also why we want to stay ahead of it, right? And we have to we have to make sure Monty's better than just generic ChatGPT or generic Bard for this one use case, So, but we figured we had to jump in fast, and we're still learning every day, and who knows? Like I said, that may change. It reminds me a little bit of like when the internet. I remember this like in the 90s. I was just graduating at MIT when like Netscape first launched, the first web browser. And, and then obviously Microsoft reacted with Internet Explorer and then eventually Mozilla Firefox. But like, and the same thing with search engines, right? There were a bunch, Inktomi, and there were a whole bunch of them, frankly, before Google.
Yeah. And
so it reminds me of those very early internet days where, no one really knows who's going to be the winner in 5 or 10 years. But I think you just got to jump in, start innovating and learn, with the industry.
So obviously, as you described, you move very fast into this for the reasons that you sort of mentioned, and also previously you talked about the current, like the majority of the SaaS user experience is this kind of workflows that most SaaS companies kind of adopt. Now with AI, ChatGPT, etc., we're seeing perhaps a better user experience. Do you think that all SaaS companies or the majority of SaaS companies should be looking at this? And should be looking at their products and looking at bringing in this element of AI in some way, as you have done? Because I mean, again, I don't know in terms of the financials and the commercials and the resources that you need it. And obviously you've got your startups and the bigger companies like yourselves. But those that are listening, what should they be doing, thinking about AI with their products right now? What's your advice to them?
I do think for most SaaS vendors, I would recommend quickly adopting AI, because I do think this, conversational AI-driven interface will just be a better software interface. And not to mention, it's just better at going and fetching data than search ever would be. Like in a CRM use case, hey, how do I find the right account record? And, so I do think it's just such a better user experience. And especially, I think most of us, in the SaaStock communities, we're the innovators, we're the disruptors. So I do think, we have to seize the technology faster and better than the big incumbents. And even, obviously the big software industry leaders like Salesforce, right there, they've announced all of their Slack GPT, their Einstein GPT. So frankly, I think the big vendors are doing it too.
Yeah.
And and I also think for startups, though, we may have the advantage, we can reimagine our interface more, because obviously as all legacy providers, the big incumbents, they have to be more careful. And I think we can experiment faster. And honestly, I don't think it takes a ton of resources. And like my co-founder, Mike Wheeler, our CTO, who's building Monty, he's obviously a great traditional programmer, but he's like, this is totally different, because, he actually instructs Monty just with words. There's like a code wrapper we build around Monty, but it's also a different form of programming. And it's also a little bit more art than science. And it's just this fascinating new field. But I also think most startup entrepreneur CTOs will love it. Most of you are probably already trying it, but it is pretty easy to start experimenting, start learning. And so I would encourage, almost everyone to do it. Obviously, there's some use cases it might not be a good fit, but I do think, it's a key area in which to start learning, start experimenting, and start delivering a better user experience.
Yep. Agree. And you'd also mentioned, I mean, prior to this, that you're currently streamlining and reimagining internal processes. Is this also sort of with AI, or is this kind of separate? And what's your hope for outcome?
Yeah, and we are building, for example, also a sales Monty. And the idea is that most of the basic questions, and as I mentioned, we have over 3,000 customers, marketers at software vendors. And frankly, sales Monty, we're also training on our gong calls, because we do find, probably like most companies, most of the FAQs, right? And traditionally you enable your reps, right? Everyone creates enablement and you're like, hey, here's the 50 most common questions, learn them. And frankly, the AI can learn those really fast. And so I think that's, and also for customer support, customer success use cases, we've also injected all of our documentation. And frankly, we just spent the last 2 or 3 years greatly updating our documentation. One of our team members, Tim Silber, does that. And frankly, like anyone else, right, it turned into like thousands of online pages. But the problem with traditional documentation is like, you have to know like, hey, I need chapter 12, page 358 to find that nugget of knowledge you need at that moment. And again, AI, I think, is just a much better interface also for documentation. So we're really excited to create a sales customer success Monty that can just answer our prospects and customers' questions in real time. And then sales can get involved later, when they need or are ready for human assistance. And we also think in SMB, Monty may be able to just close the deal and go all the way, and we think the modern software buyer a lot of times prefers that. Mm-hmm. Obviously, sometimes you need that expert from the vendor, but sometimes you're like, hey, just answer my questions. And then once I'm satisfied it's a good solution for me, like tell me the price and just let me buy, So we do think, again, a conversational AI interface for B2B commerce is also very promising for G2. And now, so we're and what's interesting, each of those flavors of Monty right now is trained on a different vector database, with different unique data we're injecting. But now we're going to create like a meta Monty that can also figure out, which Monty do you need, Alex, right? Are you buying software right now? Are you a marketer that wants to, better position themselves on G2? Are you an existing customer? And then, but we're training Monty, and I think everyone can do this. Especially for the sales use case, you probably have Gong course, you have recordings, you have your conversation somewhere, you have your FAQs, we have our documentation. So I think, and honestly, this stuff, what's exciting, I don't think it's that hard to do. You don't need that many resources. I think you just need some very entrepreneurial, innovative thinkers and people that like to try stuff and learn fast. And to me, that's how most startups are built. Like you have people like that. So I think it's super promising for those internal and customer support, sales support use cases as well.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I like the sound of what you're doing there, and looking forward to seeing that and experiencing it, and also seeing Monty walk around SaaStock in Dublin in October.
Yes, Monty will be there, and now Monty's becoming sentient, as I like to say, with AI.
Yeah, we should actually, maybe we should have on stage Godard versus Monty and SaaS trivia, but that
would be fun.
Yeah.
Although it was humbling.
Yeah, exactly.
Like Monty.
We got to be careful.
Yeah, Monty knows everything that. Yeah, he has a whole world of, he has a whole database of software. Every data point we have in G2, and there's like billions of data points. He has it all accessible, right? My brain is much foggier.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the answer is Monty would win, but not necessarily with you. But another thought was like we could have like a quiz on stage where people could challenge Monty, onto like SaaS questions, and there's a prize. But I get it's like humans playing, or Gary Kasparov's playing Deep Blue or whatever it was, the chess. So we'll see. We can work on it. But I'm going to move into the quick fire round now, Godard. So what one thing has moved the needle the most for you in your career?
I think I would say conscious leadership. And, specifically, I started working with conscious leadership coaches about 15 years ago, towards the end of my journey of big machines. And I do think it's made me a better leader and a happier human.
Yeah. How would you surmise conscious leadership for those listening that don't know what that is?
Yes. The core principle of conscious leadership is becoming more self-aware, or they call it leading and living from an above the line place. And when I'm above the line, I can be creative. I can be a good positive coach and challenger to my team. Whereas when I'm below the line, for me, it tends to be I'm angry and I'm kind of probably too aggressive, and rather than challenging people in a positive way, I might be belittling them, or not making them feel good, which ultimately reduces their ability to create and reduces their energy. And so it's this idea of how can I live my life more above the line from a more self-aware, conscious place, which, in fact, what I've also learned, then I just feel better in the moment. I enjoy the experience more at work or with my family if I'm above the line. Whereas if I'm below the line, I'm righteous, I'm angry, I feel sad, I feel tired. So it's really, to me, it unlocks more energy and more creativity, for myself and the people I'm working with. And those of you who'd like to learn more, I mean, they have a great free community website, conscious.is, conscious is, and encourage you all to check it out, because for me, it's been just a real game changer.
Thanks for sharing that. And what's the best advice you've ever received?
And it's probably more like contra advice, maybe advice I gave myself. Because I think when I first started as an entrepreneur way back in 2000, I think I spent like the first 3 years really maybe listening to advice too much. And I had some great board members, right? And I think this is typical for young entrepreneurs, where you're kind of like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to listen to my board, my investors, my advisors. But then, and I think that's good to listen. But at the end of the day, I also learned like you got to follow your own informed intuition. And I figured like 3 years into my first company, I was almost failing, and we were heading towards bankruptcy, burned through like 19 of 20 million of money we raised the first year and had nothing to show for it. And I was kind of like, like it's good to listen to people. But at the end of the day, as an entrepreneur, I found like really also listening to my own informed intuition and, kind of following my heart and my gut actually led to a lot more success than kind of trying to, please everyone else, listen to everyone else. And so I do recommend that to most entrepreneurs, like, yes, listen to others, but at the end of the day, your own business better than anyone else. Your customers better. And frankly, I also thought if I'm going to fail, I'd rather fail like having tried to do what I really believe in, and I'm like, so, and if in another year I'm done, at least I will have followed what I believe was the right path. And honestly, from then, like the business started working better.
Good, good contra advice, or good advice on that. I actually recently heard that. I can't remember who said that, but their advice was, look, nobody knows the business better than you, so you should often, trust your gut. And it resonated with the crowd of entrepreneurs that were in the audience there. And it was almost like an awakening. We're like, oh, they're right. We know the business best. We need to trust our gut more often than we do, for sure. What about the hardest thing about being a CEO?
I'd say like right now, like in the past year, we've gone behind plan, and then that always feels like heavy to me. Like I feel sad and I get mad at myself, like, because I think the last year, and obviously there's always good external reasons like marketing spend and tech really showed down, but like it's still emotionally, I feel like I'm failing. And I feel like those times, it can be emotionally draining, right? If you internalize all of that and just beat yourself up, because then I feel like, oh, I'm failing myself, I'm failing my investors, my team, because I'm not growing as fast as I'd planned. And so that always, I think those are to me the rough patches in entrepreneurship. And being a CEO is like, and I think every CEO I've ever met, even like my entrepreneur idol is like, I don't know, pick someone like Mark Benioff, right? I think every CEO goes through that. You don't crush every quarter. And then I think those times when you're failing, when you're missing plan, like finding, tapping your own resilience, finding the energy to continue. Because probably at those times your team needs you more than ever. But I feel like that's the hardest part of the CEO job, right? At the end of the day, you're accountable for everything, and you got to keep leading forward, even when, when you feel like maybe you're failing and you're not getting it done. You still have to find your own energy and resilience so you can keep leading forward, even when the outcomes aren't coming the way you want.
I know you're a big reader. Many founders are, not all, but many are. What book are you currently reading, or the last book that you read that you would recommend?
Actually, I just finished a biography on Warren Miller,
Okay,
which many of you might not know, but he's the original kind of created the outdoor movie ski industry.
Okay.
And, but also a fascinating entrepreneur, obviously very different and very interesting life, where he kind of was like a ski bum. And then he discovered, this was like way back in the 50s. He was the first guy to start making ski movies. And then over like 50 years, built a whole interesting business. And I love outdoors. I love skiing. So I do love reading entrepreneur biographies, and Warren Miller's is the most recent.
Yeah, I always think I should read more biographies or autobiographies, and always leaning towards the business books, but my upcoming holiday, I'm going to try and not read any business books, but I'm sure I'll get some learnings that I can apply to business, whatever it is that I read. So coming to the end of the show now, Godard, you will be back at SaaStock in Dublin in October. So delighted for that. I'm not sure how many SaaStocks you've done now, but it's a lot. And, but in a good way, I mean that. And so I'm really looking forward to being back with you in Dublin. For those that maybe haven't been, like, what's a couple of your favorite things, either about Dublin or SaaStock, and sort of reasons why, and what are you looking forward to?
Yeah, and I do love coming to SaaStock in Dublin, and I think it's there's thousands of SaaS entrepreneurs and SaaS leaders, and I do feel like they're my brethren. I think Alex, you and I have also developed a bond, right? But I think especially as like SaaS entrepreneurs, like, it does feel like, it's kind of a special natural community and bond. And then, sharing what I've learned, what I'm learning, is always wonderful. And I always walk away feeling more energized, because especially right now, for many of us, it's a tough, maybe struggle. It's hard to raise money. It's, so it's a tougher time. And I always get a lot of energy just meeting fellow entrepreneurs and, learning, sharing best practices, sharing tips. And I think we all walk away more energized and more excited to keep building.
Yeah, no, 100%. I appreciate you sharing that, and very much looking forward to it. Well, Godard, I will see you in October. I appreciate you coming on the podcast, sharing exciting things that you're doing with AI. Wishing you a great summer in Colorado and wherever you may be vacationing, if you are. But we'll see you in Dublin, 16th to the 18th of October. Thank you so much, Godard Abel, CFG2.
Thank you, Alex, and good luck with your holiday in Ibiza. I hope
Thanks.
Hope it all works out and you enjoy it.
Fingers crossed. I'm sure I will. I'm sure we will. We'll get there.